Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane. You know, Don's had quite a career in radio and television, where he's been an air personality, a news anchor, even a TV weatherman.
And John has been a college professor. He's written several books, and he's been an editor and features writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper.
We first teamed up for a radio show in college. On one show, we introduced a soothing musical interlude.
But we stumbled, and it came out Musical Innertube.
And that became the name for this podcast, where we talk with interesting people about their interesting lives, difference makers who really make a difference.
Back a while ago here on the Musical Innertube, we talked with Mary Lyon as part of a program we did to kind of look for the roots of the Musical Innertube and go back to its origins at radio station KUCI on the campus of the University of California at Irvine, in California. And Mary has graciously accepted our invitation to come back and fill in some gaps, because at the time she talked a little bit about where she had worked and what she had done, and she has been a reporter in Los Angeles for a number of years and interviewed a lot of different people, and she said, boy, do I have stories to tell. So we thought, Mary, come on and tell your stories. How are you today, Mary?
I'm good, and I kind of don't even know where to start.
Well, Mary, I'll start off by asking you to tell us about a very famous musician that you've talked to. I know you've talked to a lot of them, but just one. What's the first one that pops into your memory?
Harry Nilsson, rest his soul.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Was he?
Oh, God.
Okay, so was Harry sober when you spoke to him?
Exactly. Yes, he was. I was in Burbank and had an opportunity to interview him. As heck yes. And he came and sat and talked, and John Lennon had been, recently lost, and he was a good friend. So that was a good hook for the interview. And so it went very well. And then we finished, and he was thirsty. So I suggested on the way out to the parking lot, we would pass by not only the Johnny Carson Tonight Show studios, which was kind of neat to, kind of ogle, but also the commissary. And he could get a cup of coffee or, something. And we did. And he said, so, tell me about that night. And I remembered I had put in my usual 152-hour day, and I was home early evening in my bathrobe because Bruce had made some wonderful broccoli parmesan, and because he's the cook in the house, and thank God for it. And
Bruce is your spouse. We should let people know. Yeah.
Yes, Bruce is a fellow Irvineite, and a fellow KUCI alum, and I've forgotten how long it is that we've been married, but since the 70s. So it's like, anybody asks, I say, it was 1976. You do the math. Anyway, we were eating and, gonna be ready to go to bed, and the phone rings. And it was this older fellow who did the night side desk at NBC Burbank, named Sherman Bizzell, and he walked with a limp, and he was a veteran of many journalistic wars, and everybody loved him, and everybody, male and female, could do an impersonation of him because he had a very distinctive way of talking, and this, you knew it was him as soon as he opened his mouth. Mary, Sherman Bizzell here in Burbank, New York just called, and one of the Lennon brothers just got shot. And,
Vladimir,
I looked at my phone. I went, Lennon Brothers. And so the computing starts in your mind. Said, Lennon Brothers, John Lennon. No, it couldn't be John Lennon. Okay, Sherm, I'll call New York. And I did. And sure enough, and they said, you go get React. And so I called, and by then it was really late at night, and I got hold of Art Garfunkel, who was very annoyed for having been discovered at home, and how did you get my number? And, I forgot how I got his number, but I had it. And he gave me a soundbite that's, well, okay, fine. That's the best you could do. So, these many months later, I was interviewing Harry Nilsson. And I told him that story. And so we're sitting in the middle of the commissary. And I said, one of the Lennon brothers just got shot. And he started laughing. And I don't mean just laughing, I mean roaring. Threw his head back and just bellowed, almost tipped over the back of his chair onto the floor. And everybody else in the commissary is like looking, like, who is that? Most of them probably didn't even recognize who it was. He said, oh my God, that's the funniest thing I ever. John would have loved that. And so, yeah, one of the Lennon brothers.
You could hear Lennon laughing up in heaven, right?
Right. Was there a woman sitting at the table next to him saying, I'll have what he has?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, his laugh carried all the way across to the other end of the parking lot, I swear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and everybody turned and looked, and I thought, "Oh, gee, here I am with Harry Nilsson, and he's laughing at something I said, and oh my God,
these guys, these professional musicians. I mean, people don't realize what a difficult enterprise it is to be one, and to be on the road and to be traveling around and playing your music. I mean, they both love doing it, and many of them don't like the road. And sometimes when they get interviewed, they get asked the same questions all the time. I'm sure you've noticed that in some of the ones that you've interviewed. I'm wondering if there was a time when you asked a question that really surprised somebody and they said, that's really an interesting question, and gave it some thought and gave you a surprising answer. Can you think of one?
It skips my mind a little bit, but the one thing I remember about that is Suzanne Watley, whose big sister Dixie Watley was one of the original hosts of Entertainment Tonight. And Suzanne, the nicest young woman, hardworking. And at one point she came up to me after a junket we were all at and said, "You ask really good questions." And I thought, "Oh, well, thank you."
Yeah.
I had Tyne Daly walk out on me in the middle of a press conference backstage when I always tried to be polite, not, in your face. And I figured, well, that's my shtick. I can be kind of disarming and, non-threatening, and maybe they'll talk to me. And I asked her something about, something that she had a lot of questions about in her personal life, and I think addiction or whatever it was. And we already had, a lot of her comments on this in public, but I wanted, to see if I could get a little deeper and find out, how it was with her. And I asked her my little question, and her eyes bugged out, and she glared at me, and then she turned 90 degrees and slowly sashayed off the stage. And it's like, oop. So I never did get an answer to that, but later on, I think I interviewed her again. And
whatever was the question?
I forget what, and I didn't bring it up because she's talking to me now. So okay,
right.
But let's not mess
no
it
repeats.
up twice.
Yeah.
Hopefully she won't remember, And there was one time when I was I did a lot of premieres, the gangbang behind the red velvet ropes, and I mean, everybody was there. It was, all of us radio people, all of the TV people, the Entertainment Tonight, the Showbiz Today version, which is what CNN had on at the time. And one of the last people in to the theater where we were outside of getting arrivals was Johnny Carson, and his, I guess, Alex was his wife at that time, and wife number 3. And he was always notorious. I think he talked to Robert Hilburn at length for the LA Times at one point, and that was like the only interview he did in decades. He just didn't talk to the press. And I took a chance, hollered, "Mr. Carson, what do you think?" And he, as he was just about walking in the door, because I was right there, and he broke the line, came over, leaned into me, went, "Yeah, and it wound up being this is great, and it was a soundbite. It took me a long time to figure out if I could even use it in one of my 60-second Hollywood reports. But the reaction of in the press pen, I mean, they looked at me and with shock and said, "He never talks to anybody. You got Johnny Carson to talk to you. Oh my God." And for a few minutes, I was breathing rarefied air with a sound bite that, was not gettable and not usable, but he came over and, moved the meter on my tape machine. And so,
That's something that I was interested in. When you talk to somebody, a lot of these famous people, when you approach them with a microphone, especially in an unset up situation, there's they do one-on-ones in hotel rooms and things like that to back up their latest movie or whatever. But
Sure.
You're in an uncontrolled situation, like at a premiere outside on the red carpet or whatever. When you approach these people with a microphone, do you get that immediate repel, like, oh my God, the defenses go up because they're scared of somebody coming up at them with a microphone?
Either that, or they just were recently burned by an interviewer, or their time was wasted. So I always tried to do a little bit of Mary shtick, which is, "Hi, do you like my big brown eyes? I'm totally harmless. I'm not going to eat you. I'm a fan." I always tried to get this look on my face like, you can talk to me. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm harmless. And then sometimes I'd be able to sneak something in, but and also my almost impossible to please supervisor at AP in Washington, which was where the Broadcast News Center was. He'd come out for big things like the Oscars and the Emmys or whatever, and, free trip to LA. And one of the few things he said to me that was ever complimentary and not critical was, "Your voice carries." And that came to be really a useful tool, like backstage at the Oscars, when they'd be bringing the celebrities and the winners back, and we'd all be shouting questions, and it would be us, all the press thrown in together, including the print people who have no idea what people need when they have microphones.
Right.
We sit with press people who are print people, and every sentence the interview subject says is met by, "Oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, I did, and so we in radio, or we in audio, are like grinding our teeth, saying, "Will you please shut up? Do you know how much editing I'm going to have to do back, to cut out all your ums and ahs and oh yeah and oh and that." Oh God, it was infuriating, to the point where there was a group of us, radio people, who got tired of being hind-teat. And, where
I want to tell our listeners that that's a term of art, in the audio world. They say hind teat. It means king of the hill, doesn't it, Nancy?
In a way, and it's not tit, okay?
Yes.
But you can bleep that out if you need to.
Okay.
We got tired of being, at the way back of the bus, and sometimes not even included, because radio was not given, as the senior medium. Thank you. Radio
Yes.
was given very short shrift, and we were there before TV. Okay, and everybody wanted the TV people, and we were lucky if we got a gangbang of a bunch of us at one table with one celebrity. And
we should let people know gangbang is when one person sits for an interview, but there are 17 interviewers or more coming in, a gang of interviewers coming up as opposed to a one-on-one interview.
And we were pretty freewheeling with the, nicknames and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But, it got to be frustrating. So a bunch of us, several people from big radio syndication services, and those like Gail Murphy at ABC Radio, and a few other people, at various outlets. We got together in what was then the upper room of the Hard Rock Cafe on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills, which is no longer there. The cafe is Beverly Hills is still there, but this, that was long gone by now. But we got together. One of us reserved the room, and we got to talking about how frustrating this was. And I mean, by then I was at the AP, which had like 1,500 stations. It was the biggest radio network in the country, unless you factored in Armed Forces Radio, which it was partnered with. So you're talking worldwide. The Associated Press, okay? Mark Twain was a fan, okay? In fact, I have several awards. The Mark Twain Trophy, and the little plaque on the front quotes him as saying, "There are two sources of illumination in the universe: the sun in the heavens and the Associated Press down here." So whenever I thought, it's just the AP, no, it's just the AP. Yeah. And I was very proud. I was their first entertainment reporter. They added me on in Hollywood because they only had the guy in Washington, and they thought they better expand. And,
wow.
And so they expanded with me. And we sat around a couple of big tables grousing about how we did not like having to, take whatever was left. And so what if we band together? And so we decided to form a collective. It became known as the Broadcast Film Critics Association, which is now the sponsor of the Critics' Choice Awards. That's very splashy on TV every year. And it's like one of the opening award shows for awards season. And so I'm really very proud of that. It's like, wow.
That's terrific.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah. So, that was pretty thrilling to be part of that. And it kind of helped, depending. I mean, you could almost never get one-on-ones with the lead actor or actress of a film. But I did remember, when Tom Cruise was begging for coverage because he had a couple of really clunker movies, and his publicist actually called and said, "Hey, do you want Tom Cruise?" I'm, yeah,
Right.
And my, he was very nice. And my first impression of him was, my goodness, he's short. And secondly was his front teeth. One of his two front teeth was right perfectly in the center of his head. So it was like his teeth were sort of out of
off
alignment
to the side a little bit.
And I was fat. I couldn't stop gaping at that. I said, wow, Tom Cruise, and he was, and he was very handsome, and he was quite a bit younger, and he was very cordial and nice and answered all our questions. It was just like two or three of us together who got this coveted interview with Tom Cruise as they were trying to, bump him back on top. And, eventually there was no way we were, the lowly us in radio were ever going to get a a one-on-one or a three-on-one interview with him ever again. But that was pretty cool. And he was very nice.
That's
one
good.
thing I learned from him and a bunch of other people is the celebrities themselves are very nice and very approachable, especially when they know they need to be because they need the, coverage and, promoting the new movie. It's the people they hire around them, the buffers, who are the pains in the ass and won't give you access and won't take your calls and won't return your calls. And, unless you were Bob Thomas of the Associated Press, who was an eminent screeze around there. People spoke of him in hushed tones, and he had his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That's how big he was. And
kind of an equal star almost.
Yeah. And you don't mess with Bob Thomas. He was it. I mean,
How do you put together entertainment? Your assignment is entertainment reporter, and you have to put together entertainment news. How do you? Is it all driven by the publicists and by what's coming at you, or do you go out and try to find stories the way you would with news?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thanks very much, Mary. And now for the next question.
Our next question. Yeah. I used to live in Brentwood. I live in Oregon now because I'm retired and I'm just, enjoying white hair and, no deadlines. And, and I'm a grandmother twice over by now. Yes.
Ooh, yay. Congratulations.
Thank you. 2 little girls. Oh, my God. I hope they can find husbands. I worry about them already. It's like everyone I know is having little girls and they're just adorable and cute as can be. But it's like somebody's got to have some boys because who are all these little girls going to date? I worry about stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a deep dive there, Mary.
I'm sorry. Anyway, where was I?
You were talking about how to get stories.
Yeah, you always looked for the hook. Where it was much more likely you were going to be able to convince some a-hole publicist who was there to keep you from getting to their star, to allow you to get to their star. And, if they had a movie coming up or a TV, news series or a special or whatever, yes, you could get access. But I did try to keep my antennae open and up when I was going to the, Brentwood Country Mart or, up to Brent Air Pharmacy or something, you'd see him in the grocery store. I saw Rod Serling in the grocery store. I'd see Alfred Hitchcock and his wife at Sunday Mass, front row, right on the aisle. And she had a big black hat. And so I used to kind of, go out trolling sometimes. And usually if I met them, you try to be really gentle about the approach because, now it would be terrible because there's so many nutcases out there with guns. But sometimes I would ask, I'd introduce myself, of course, and my credential and say, I would love to interview you. And they'd give me information. And, they seldom ever wanted to do anything on the fly right there. But,
sure.
I always tried to treat them as human beings. I always tried to, go for the angle where the most people could kind of relate, like, motherhood in general, and, when the publicist tells you in advance, do not ask about the divorce. Do not ask, the very reason you're there. They don't want you asking the dicey question or the sex change or the whatever the heck it is.
Yes.
And so then it became like a holy quest to figure out how I could ask about that in the least, offensive or the most sneakiest, most disarming way and get at least 10 or 15 seconds of answer that I could use in, my 60-second produced piece, which was the Hollywood report that I did every day. And so it usually wound up being some version of, given the latest headline or scandal or uproar or whatever words you want to attach to it, how do you cope with, the public, breathing down your necks or whatever. And I always got a response because I think they felt like that might be a way to plead their case or gain some sympathy or, whatever. But I always got to cover whatever the dicey part was by doing it that way. And, it's not, oh, tell us about the abortion you just had. How do you cope with having to lose, having to go through such a tumultuous event in your life that you probably were never expecting you'd have to deal with, and you'd always get something that, revealed at least a little bit of, inside.
That's very
them.
clever, actually. Yeah, you ask an environmental question, an ambience question, that would invite them to bring in what's been happening. So you don't come on with, so what about that congressional investigation into your finances, right? So how are you doing on chicken and rice every night?
Yeah, well, do you have a special recipe maybe your mom gave you?
Yeah.
Or is there something you inherited from your grandma? And then you might get an anecdote about their life as a kid or what made them go into showbiz or something their dad told them that they've never forgotten now that he just died. And, there were all kinds of ways you could kind of weasel your way around the wall that the publicist protectively tried to build. And, I always tried to, hope that I'd get something that would reveal them as people, not just that flashy, glittery person you see on the silver screen, because everybody can see that. But, try to scratch the surface a little bit and, get where you can actually feel a pulse.
We'll have more of Mary's stories in a moment, but first, this soothing musical Innertube.
After leaving KUCI, Mary worked in Los Angeles radio as the first female drive time news anchor and first female news director. The stations she worked for included KNAC in Long Beach, KLOS, 93 KHJ, KFWB, and K-Earth 101 in Los Angeles.
Mary worked for NBC in both New York and Burbank, California, before becoming the first ever entertainment reporter for the Associated Press. She worked in television at KTLA in Los Angeles and on HGTV's Smart Solutions program. And she was a founding member of the Broadcast Film Critics Association.
Mary wrote and illustrated The Frazzled Working Woman's Practical Guide to Motherhood, published in 1997. You can follow her on Twitter at Mary_Lyon, Lyon.
And now, back to Mary, Don, and John on the musical Innertube, already in progress.
Did you ever talk to any sports figures?
Nothing comes to mind, and that's probably a very good thing for both them and me, because I sure hate to sound dumb. And, I remember one time when I was asked to do color on some, school. I think it was at Irvine, and it was a basketball game. And I just was such a colossal failure that they thanked me very diplomatically during halftime and sent me on my way. And that was just fine because I had no idea what I was doing. Sports is like, I guess there's a ball involved in some way. Or, it's like I think about the Woody Allen movie where his girl of the moment was complaining about, the 5 pituitary cases shoving a ball through a hoop. And that's about where I am, I'm afraid. unless it's O.J. Simpson, and then you didn't have to talk to him. There was lots of, flotsam and jetsam you could do and build a story around.
Speaking of OJ or people who lived in both worlds, you did too. You did some hard reporting, if you will, some reporting on the news, and then you did your reporting on entertainment. Yep. What's the difference between interviewing somebody who really could make a difference in somebody's life, a government figure or a political figure, and somebody who's kind of larger than life, but really, you could live without the movie if you had to? Yeah.
Well, I used to put in long hours because that's what it took to get the job done every day. And if I was there, at pushing 11 o'clock or midnight, and there was a plane crash at LAX, which there was, or the First Interstate Bank fire was erupting just down the street elsewhere in downtown LA, there was nobody there. They had to send me. And, grab the tape recorder and go. And, later on, it was really nice hearing from the guy who was on the desk in Washington, Rich Johnson, I think he was, and he said, "You're doing a real good job." And I thought, wow, I'm covering a fire. And no one's there saying, cut, print it. And it's just like fire trucks all over the place, and it's not props and special effects, And in fact, I think one of my voicers was about it. It's like being in a disaster movie, with the sparks falling from like 33 stories over, and if you can, cover it in a flowery way. So if somebody's listening on the radio, they still get a mental picture, then, you do good. And I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah. Did you think that the guy was surprised that somebody who did entertainment work could actually do real news?
Yeah.
Was that kind of the vibe that you got there?
Yeah, kind of, because, the people in Washington, they were in Washington, okay? And that's a company town too, but it's all politics. And I mean, they deal with presidents of the United States, and their pals who come to visit for summits, and they're presidents of whatever the country is, and they, like one of my big stories, and it was the biggest story that, it was the story that ate everything else up, was the Zsa Zsa Gabor cop slapping trial.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. Long time ago.
You can hear the eyeballs roll from 3,000 miles away. But I was the entertainment reporter in LA, and this was when I was working at the AP, and Zsa Zsa was news, especially since she had a big mouth, and she was given to saying any non sequiturs that just everybody wanted, and I'd call in, with tape to feed, and a voice or a rap or whatever, and one of the people on the desk, was used to, dealing with presidents and prime ministers and secretaries of state and, major league hitters in, Congress and the Senate. And they said, the affiliates can't get enough Zsa Zsa. That's all they want. They're calling in for refeeds. They've been calling in for refeeds all day. All they want is Zsa Zsa. So maybe you better put together another package, to freshen it a little. And, including like when she was scolded for talking to the press, and she wound up for, a few minutes saying, "No comment." No comment.
It's amazing. I saw some of the wildest interviews I ever saw on television with Zsa Zsa. She didn't have a movie out. She didn't have a book out. She was just herself.
Yeah.
And
that's all you needed.
It's unbelievable. She would just go. I mean, I like people like that,
Oh, God. And I was like 59 weeks pregnant by then, and big as the court building, and oh, God, it was rough. And I was behind the ropes as she, would go in and out of the courtroom, and she came up to me. You could not miss me because of the size of my, that was the last story I covered before I literally 5 days later went into, the hospital to deliver Elizabeth. And she came up to me and she patted my stomach and she said, "Darling, you're going to name it after me?" And the only thing I could think of to say was, "Well, no, but it does have a Z in it, because Elizabeth." And she reacted in such a way that she seemed to find that acceptable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my daughter Elizabeth, she's like, what, 32, 33 now? That's how long it's been. But, oh, my God. Yeah, so it's just, there were some interesting little moments there.
Well, what was more difficult for you, covering politics or real news, hard news, or covering Hollywood and entertainment?
Neither one. You just, you keep up on the news, and if that's what you have to do for a living, you're going to think of something to ask them. And, again, I was always looking for the softer side, because it's easier to chew in through the woodwork when, you can get them on some sort of personality angle. But, the president of the United States and the vice president and the secretary of state, they're also people, usually with kids and usually with spouses who are running out of patience, and they're on planes all the time and nobody gets to come with them except all of this, this wall of assistants and, people who also were in charge of trying to keep you away from them. And so, I always went for the human side, but I kept up because I never knew when I was going to have to drop everything and go cover a high-rise fire or a plane crash at LAX or, somebody's in town and we're short-staffed. You better get over there. And it just, I don't know. I think it helps being a news junkie, and I still am. What I do now is I'm part of my local Indivisible group, Indivisible Clackamas, and we're a scrappy little bunch where we, frankly, from all my work experience, this group is wonderful and they keep track and they're informed and they're all amateurs, and some of them never even did anything remotely like this until 2016, and never got into politics, never even gave it a thought. And now they're obsessed and they're so informed and they're great researchers and they're great writers. And I just write my little thing. And it's, I am in, I kind of took it upon myself as well, for lack of a better term, I guess I'm head writer because I'm the one who had, experience doing that. And I look for the quotes because we always have a quote to start with,
Sure.
A thought for starters. And I'll write stuff down and like I had a quote from Betty White, and thought that was timely. And
yeah, John opened with a question. What was your favorite interview? So maybe we could close with saying, what was the interview you really hated? What was an interview that you had that just went into the trash?
Yeah, and I did. It was a hard rock group. They call themselves the Fabulous Poodles. And of course, you've heard about them.
Oh, of course, yes.
Notice the recognition from John and I when you said that.
Yeah. And so, I'm always looking for an interesting quote and an interesting angle. And inevitably, I thought, okay, Fabulous Poodles, how did you get that name? And these guys were just kind of sitting around in I think it was the Four Seasons Hotel where they were holed up and doing interviews, junkets and one-on-ones and stuff. And it was my turn. And I asked my question. They went, oh, for God's sake, what, and I thought, okay, so I got nothing but, expletives for that answer. And, one of them got up off the sofa and walked out of the room, and they were sniffing and, scratching and being rude and impolite. And I remember, not wasting very much time on them. And what I did when I left the room, thanked them very much and, took my tape recorder. And when I got out of the room, I took the little cassette tape out of the tape recorder and dropped it in the first trash can I saw. And it's like, you're not getting on the AP. Our 1,500 stations and, Armed Forces Radio ain't going to hear from you if I have anything to say about it. And, yeah, it was, geez, I've talked to, I've talked to people, who were at least courteous, even if they didn't want to talk to you, even if they, and inevitably one of us is going to ask the same question that they've already had to answer, 1,500 times in a week, but that's why you always kind of tried to look for a different way in. And, pretty much I was successful with it.
And of course, the Fabulous Poodles went on to great and wonderful things, and everybody knows who they are. And
I
have several. Well, thanks for talking with us today, and enjoy your time up there with the grandkids in Oregon.
I never realized that, when you become a grandparent, your mind turns to mush. It completely does. You start thinking and saying things you never thought or said before. You just become this sort of like, heart on your sleeve kind of, sentimentalist, and you can't wait to see the little kids. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And if somebody else wanted to call me Baba, I would have punched him in the mouth.
Yeah.
But now
I don't
they can say whatever they want.
They can call me anything, I hope I will serve them better as they grow older. But, in the meantime, I have my life back. And I'm doing Indivisible, and I feel like, we're making maybe, a molecule's worth of difference. But, it's like, I feel almost like I'm running my own little news department again, and I'm having a blast.
All right. Thanks, Mary.
Hey, thank you guys. Don, John, a pleasure as always. We
love you.
Let me know when we can do this again.
Thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
You can get in touch with us by email. We're at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
You can also follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @MInnertube. Capitalize the M and I.
Our webpage is Musical Innertube. That's musical spelled with 2 A's, .libsyn, that's spelled LIBSYN.com.
The Innertube is available on Amazon Music, Audible, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio Podcasts, and anywhere that you get your podcasts. Like us and give us a good review on any of those platforms.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.